welcome to Crimes Through Time, a weekly snapshot of crime history. Francis Percy Toplis was a career criminal starting in childhood. He was a bully, a thief, and eventually a murderer. But there would be no trial or conviction. Percy would be shot and killed in a standoff with the police on the 6th of June 1920. Let's explore the case of the Monocled Mutineer and how the questions still surround how he got his nickname. Percy Toplis was born on the 22nd of August 1896 in Stamforth Street, Chesterfield, Derbyshire. His parents were Herbert and Rejoice Elizabeth. Unfortunately, Herbert worked a succession of low-paid jobs and they were unable to support Percy, and so he was raised by his grandparents, Rejoice's parents. He was educated at South Normanton Elementary School, where he would bully other students, actions that led him to being caned often. His first recorded crime happened on the 6th of March 1908, when he was 11. He acquired 2 suits under false pretences. For this, he was sentenced to 6 strokes of the birch at Mansfield Petty Sessions. 6 months later, after Percy failed to appear in court, his grandfather pleaded to be allowed to give him up to the court system, saying, quote, "His grandmother cannot do with him any longer, and he is out of her control." It also seems that his parents had disowned him. From here, his aunt Annie Webster, his mother's sister, took custody of him. Percy left school aged 13 in 1909, after acquiring an apprenticeship at Blackwell Colliery. This didn't last long. He frequently didn't turn in and was argumentative with the management. He was sacked when he was discovered drinking in the Blackwell Arms instead of being on a night shift. Percy would decide to leave home and strike out on his own, moving to Scotland. It was a transient lifestyle, travelling and supporting himself with petty crime. In 1911, he was sentenced to 10 days in prison in Dumfries for not paying for 2 train tickets. But it would be in 1912 that he committed his first known violent crime. Having returned to England, Percy met farmer's daughter Nellie North in Sutton-on-Sea. They were both aged 15. He followed her past Brown's farm, and when they reached the railway crossing, Percy attacked. Nellie was later examined at the doctor's surgery in Maplethorpe, where signs of, quote, force and violence were found, but thankfully the sexual assault had been unsuccessful. Percy was quickly arrested, but gave his name as William Edmondson of Sutton. He explained he was on his way to Skegness to visit his uncle. Percy was charged at Alford Police Station and would be sentenced to 2 years hard labour, which he served in Lincoln Prison. He was released in August 1914. In 1915, a year into the First World War, Percy joined the Royal Army Medical Corps. He served as a stretcher bearer. His first post was at Lewes. On the 17th of June 1915, Percy was part of a force sent to Gallipoli. Conditions were horrific. Percy was injured and contracted dysentery, but he and his comrades would not be evacuated until the end of the campaign in early 1916. Percy returned to England and received hospital care, regaining his full health. He worked for a time in a Gretna munitions factory before being sent back on active duties, being stationed in Salonika and Egypt. But he would contract malaria and be shipped home. From September 1917, Percy was seconded to the troopship Orontes, travelling to India, where he was stationed for the next few months. Here, I need you to come with me on a little side discussion. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. The Monocled Mutineer nickname given to Percy wasn't from the newspapers of the time of his crimes, as we often see in other cases. It came from a book published in 1978 by William Allison and John Fairley, which named Percy as a leading participant in the Topless mutiny that took place in France September 1917. They claimed Percy was part of a band of army deserters based in the area and that wanted posters were issued for his arrest in France. They also cited the aggressive way the British police pursued Percy when he goes on the run in 1920, and that he was shot by them as proof he was one of the leaders of the mutiny that escaped punishment. In 1986, the book was adapted for TV by the BBC, but the researchers soon distanced themselves, quoting serious inaccuracies after service records were found showing Percy was on board the Orontes, plus a witness statement from a soldier that witnessed the mutiny and claimed, quote, "Never once did I see or hear any reference to Topless." The cause of the confusion might be that there was 3 Percy Toplesses from the Midlands who served in World War I. The book and the play project a romantic working-class hero, but whether this fictional Percy was in fact the Percy Topless that would die at the hands of the police at the end of this case seems to be up for debate. Eyes turn to the official files kept by the British government on the mutiny by the soldiers housed at, quote, the Bull Ring training camp in Topless, which were due to be published into the public domain by the National Archives in 2017. However, it would turn out that the records of the Topless Board of Inquiry had been destroyed many years previous. Let me know what you think. I tend to believe the records for the ship, which are authentic, and there is a lack of any record that Percy deserted in 1917. Now back to Percy and our case timeline. The Royal Army Medical Corps returned to England in August 1918, with Percy amongst their ranks. They were based in Blackpool. It is now that Percy did desert. His father had died, prompting him to go AWOL. He returned to petty crime. In November 1918, he was sentenced to 6 months' imprisonment in Nottingham Assizes for fraud. Percy, upon release, would join the Royal Army Service Corps. He was still a deserter, but the Great War was over and interest in pursuing punishments had waned. He was stationed at Bulford Camp. He soon became involved in black market sale of rationed fuel, as well as forging paperwork to steal other soldiers' salaries. He would visit ladies in the town dressed in a colonel's uniform, including a gold monocle, to, quote, cut a dash, and complete his disguise. On the 24th of April 1920, Percy went AWOL again. At around 9:45 p.m, Sidney George Spicer, a taxi driver, was shot dead on Thuxton Down near Andover. At 11 p.m, Percy was seen in Sidney's car alone on the Bulford camp. He then deserted his post. The next 2 weeks Percy spent in London, hobnobbing with upper classes, masquerading as a decorated army officer with landowning descent. The inquest into George's death took place in a barn on Thuxton Down. The jury returned a verdict of wilful murder against Percy Toplis. He was now wanted for murder, and the press coverage and police activity was relentless. Percy chose to leave London for Monmouth, Wales, with the view to hide in the isolated environment. The Dundee Courier of the 7th of May 1920 reported that a cap with Percy's name in was found in Pontypool. A week later, a sighting of Percy was reported at the Salem Baptist Church in Blarney, which is just over a mile from Nantiglow, the birthplace of Jesse Robert Shaw, the only man known to have been executed for his role in the Topless Mutiny. Percy would arrive in Scotland on the 6th of May. He found work as a woodcutter on a shooting estate in Dummerglass. On the 12th of May, he checked into the Temperance Hotel in central Inverness under the name G. Waters. He explained he had just returned from Russia, entertaining the guests on the piano, singing a selection of hymns and the Russian national anthem. But the owner was suspicious, saying to Percy, quote, "It strikes me there is a mystery about you, young man." Not wanting to take any chances, Percy left on the 13th of May and travelled further north to the Muir of Old and Lot Rosk. On the 1st of June, following an unusually cold snap in the weather, Percy lit a fire in the remote bothy he was hiding in. The smoke was spotted by a hill farmer checking stock, and it was reported to the gamekeeper. They both returned to the bothy with Constable George Gregg around 11 p.m. that night. Percy could not talk his way out of an altercation and fired his revolver, shooting the constable in the shoulder and the farmer in the stomach. He fled on a bicycle, first to Aberdeen, where he boarded a train to Carlisle. He arrived on the 5th of June and was seen at the army base in Carlisle Castle. The next day, Percy was sitting on the side of the road that ran from Carlisle to Penryn at Low Heskett, wearing, quote, partial military dress. He was approached and questioned by PC 72 Alfred Isaac Fulton about 4 p.m. Alfred was unsatisfied after his conversation with Percy, so much so he immediately went to his station and checked the police circulars. He was convinced he had found the man responsible for Sidney's murder in Andover. Fulton returned to the road and found Percy further up in the woods changing into civilian clothing. He immediately realised why the policeman had returned. He drew his Webley Mk4 revolver and confirmed his identity. Luckily, Fulton was able to withdraw to safety, returning home. He quickly changed into his civilian clothes and jumped on his motorcycle to alert his superiors at the force headquarters in Penryn. Inspector William Ritchie and Sergeant Robert Bertram, with Fulton, all armed with Webley revolvers, took off by car to apprehend Percy. They were joined by the Chief Constable's civilian son, Norman Decory Parry, on his motorcycle, armed with an automatic pistol he had brought back from his time in service during the war. I couldn't find out why, and it was apparently without the permission of his father. At first, they failed to spot Percy and drove past him. Norman was first to turn round and stop his motorcycle near Percy, feigning mechanical problems. Percy approached. Within minutes, the car returned and the policeman jumped out and challenged him. Percy took flight and ran south down the road, turning to fire at the policemen, who were giving chase. 3 shots were fired at Percy in return. 1 proved fatal. An inquest was held at Penryn Town Hall on the 8th of June 1920, in front of Coroner Colonel Frederick William Holton. He told the jury, quote, "Where an arrest is resisted with such force that it is necessary to kill, it becomes justifiable homicide. It took them just 3 minutes to return that exact verdict," stating, quote, "Topless was justifiably killed by a revolver bullet fired by a police officer in the execution of his duty. They recommended the 3 officers be honoured for their heroic actions." But who shot Percy? Not Norman, who was carrying a pistol. It was stated that a revolver bullet struck Percy. Ritchie was closest, so close in fact he caught Percy as he fell after being shot. He was armed with a revolver but had little firearm experience. The most likely is Bertram. He had active service experience with the army and was close behind Ritchie giving chase. Percy was buried at 9 a.m. on the 9th of June in Beacon Edge Cemetery, Penryn, by the Penryn Board of Guardians, a charity responsible for matters such as this. It was witnessed by the gravedigger, Board of Guardians representative, 2 senior policemen, and the Reverend R.H. Law, Vicar of Christchurch. He insisted that Percy receive a full Christian burial, saying, quote, "This man was violently removed from this life before he could be judged on earth." The monocle that Percy used in his disguises was amongst his possessions when he died. Everything was given to the Guardians to offset the cost of the pauper's burial. The relieving officer, Councillor Johnston, was also a member of the Penryn Urban Council Historical Committee. He decided that the monocle shouldn't be sold but donated to the Penryn Museum, where it is still displayed. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think of this case in the comments below, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.